Allora invito qui Paul Carter. Anche qua la serie delle coincidenze incredibili. Durante, credo, un paio di mesi fa ricevo una mail da Paul Carter, che ho conosciuto a Melbourne nel 1999 durante un visiting. Dopo ci siamo visti più volte qua in Europa e mi manda una mail dicendo: per caso sei libero attorno al 20 aprile che vorrei parlarti di un progetto. Ho detto: ah sì, ho detto. Sì, guarda, abbiamo un convegno, non sarei impegnato. Dopo un minuto il lampo e ho detto: ma hai conosciuto Denis, che hai lavorato con Mappings, quel libro, quella collection che avete organizzato, potresti essere un giusto oratore per raccontare qualcosa della storia che vi ha legato anche culturalmente. Quindi lui ha accettato ed è qui da Melbourne. No, non è che siamo così ricchi da invitare relatori dall'Australia. È casualmente.
Grazie per il biglietto, tutto.
Sì, grazie per il biglietto.
Molto gentile.
Lui parla un ottimo italiano, però vediamo cosa decide.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and thank you to Francesco for too much noise. Can you hear me properly? Is it okay? It's a great honor to be here. It's also a great privilege to be part of a reunion. Not simply to remember Denis, but to place that legacy in perspective. And so what I would like to do is think about that word prospettiva, obviously as a way of thinking about a life in ideas, also about a veduta, point of view, with a particular reference, of course, to that image that is on the cover of the Italian translation of Il Paesaggio Palladiano, where you see a prospettiva. And then to think a little bit about all of these things, briefly, in relation to the future of the interdisciplinary studies which he pioneered. Where do we go with that? Observations. I'll start with Giuseppe Ungaretti, and I'll finish with a personal anecdote. That's the correct order, but anyway, that's what we'll do. Many of you in the room will be familiar with an essay that Ungaretti wrote, I think in the 1930s. He was employed by one of the newspapers, do you know, La Gazzetta, I'm not sure, to make a series of giri turistici culturali in Italy. I came across his essays when I was studying in Salerno, but he also, of course, wrote about the Po Valley, and also further north up to the Brenta, in an essay called I fiumi contro l'abisso. An essay because the abyss in his essay is the sea. Not a hole in the ground. It's not a Dantean underworld. He creates an opposition initially in his 1930s essay between the land and the sea. In that essay, of course, he is talking about the Paesaggio Palladiano. He's talking about precisely the zone around Vicenza and further south to the Po, which occupied Denis, and I think we ought also to say grew in stature as a study because of the association with Francesco and his community here. Work done on his own, it was a work done in a convivial environment, which Francesco has always extended, including to me in the past. But this was the environment in which Ungaretti tells some stories, and he tells these stories ironically. But nevertheless, they are interesting for us because they start placing Denis's achievement in perspective. One of the stories he tells, of course, is a semi-mythical, deep geomorphology of the region, in which the abisso, the invading climate change sea, invades Po Valley, invades the region of the Brenta, Adige, and Po as far as the foothills of the Dolomiti. It becomes a Mediterranean. But fortunately, some parts survive this inundation. And these parts are referred to in his essay as colonne, columns, not peninsulas, not isthmuses, not islands, including the Euganean hills. They're called columns. It's if the beginnings of a city is already, the foundations are being laid in the sea. Of course, we can imagine this mythologically as the beginnings of Venice. But they're called columns. And the other thing that he says about these columns is that they are distributed, these islands in the sea, like the islands in the Pacific Ocean, the islands of Polynesia. So, si dice Polesine? Sì, so the Polesine anche Polynesia. Gran gioco. So very funny, non scherzo. Why would I bother you with this when we and I particularly want to speak about this capolavoro, this great work, which is Denis's book, The Palladian Landscape. For this reason, that I want to place in perspective the sumptuous vision that he created in that book, in a historical but also in a political perspective. Truth is that the Palladian landscape as a concept overlays a very volatile environmental, social and political history. We know this because of the book itself. One of the great achievements of the Palladian landscape as a text is to combine two almost contradictory perspectives. One of these perspectives is actually picked up in Francesco's introduction to the Italian edition. And it's a perspective that relates to a perceived moment of harmony, of consolidation of various tendencies, intellectual, technological, social and economic, emerging from the Florentine Renaissance, but also coming into a tumultuous contact, like the tide coming in and the acqua dolce coming out, and they mingle in this moment of balance. Because the other tide is this crisis for Venice, which is the turning away from the sea towards the land. And you have this opposition, obviously, between the values of the farmers of Vicenza and the merchants of Venice. And it doesn't go away. It continues down to the present day, as we know. But somehow in that tumultuous, volatile moment of opposite flows, the abisso turns into a pianura fertile, and we see this extraordinary moment, which is evoked in the book. And in the introduction to that book, Francesco agrees with Denis that without nostalgia, one nevertheless has to recognize a lost possibility. There has been a process of 2.5 centuries of urbanization, of environmental exploitation, and possibly also degradation, that has lost sight of whatever that was, that Palladian moment, that perspective, which, as the cover of the book shows, brought together diverse elements harmoniously. What is very interesting about that book is that Denis shows how it was a mosaic of different points of view. It was not unified. And one of the most exhilarating aspects of that book, both as a study of a region, but also as a methodological innovation, is the compelling way in which Denis was able to bring together different disciplinary perspectives, almost with the deftness of a craftsman creating the marquetry for these doors. Every single piece fits together. And so, at the end of it, you not only have a picture of a landscape, but you also have an image of a new methodology. There is a natural harmony between the intellectual achievement of synthesis in the book and the Palladian landscape itself. There is a natural fit. We can see that the architect as a practical person, the architect as somebody walking in the estate, as I always imagined Denis walking with the ghosts of the past in intelligent conversation with them, bending over to check at a flower, whether that had a medicinal purpose, wondering precisely about the status of the fish in the water. This was Denis, at once intimately involved with the archive, at the same time walking on the banks of the rivers. You have that sense of a convergence, we'll call it a shared perspective, that allows this vision to emerge. And it's a dialectical vision. It's a vision between a future that is being remembered through the image of this past, a future of possible degradation or globalization, but also it's a vision of the past as an unrealized future. So in other words, it's about a utopianism, which is at the same time about a possible vector of development that remains relevant. One of the interesting features, it's come out again this morning, of an intellectual scholar, and on top of all of that, a humanist, is that when you move from one country to another, from, say, Vicenza to LA, you develop new intensities of affection, new affiliations. This is an important distinction I love from Edward Said, that you affiliate when you move around, if you take responsibility for your own migration. So one of the interesting features about the multifaceted, mosaic-like quality of the Palladian landscape, the book, is the way in which Denis brings to the fore the work of Cristoforo Sorte, who, of course, is extremely well known in this room. He's not a marginal figure. But what is interesting is the way in which Denis analyzes the archive. So if we think about the different aspects of Sorte's work, there are, of course, the maps, which are strictly speaking in military perspective, or they are iconographical maps, so they're half aerial, half planimetric, half vedute, prospettive. This combination, which you first see in the De Barberi map of Venice, is a way of creating a mosaic of diverse points of view. What is the function of that? Amongst other things, we know from the notebooks, the field notebooks, which we've been talking about this morning, that Sorte used those field notebooks. Because of the problem of triangulation, he had to rely greatly on measuring the distances he walked and approximating the angles. So these half maps, these half drawings, these double perspective creations of a region, which, of course, from our point of view, are also a metaphor for the way in which Denis created his own landscape, consists partly of a memory of walking and partly of a geometrical overview. And another of the great tensions, wonderful tensions in the Palladian landscape, it's one of the most, I would say, exciting challenges that Denis creates for himself, is to reconcile the, if you like, Ptolemaic centralism of one, we'll say, Florentine idea, Neoplatonic idea of stasis, where there is an ultimate reduction of movement to illusion, with the evident dynamism, the fluviatile dynamism, the mercantile dynamism, and above all the technological innovations that are going on throughout that period in the 16th century. So we see there another tension, a dialectical tension, which prevents the book from becoming nostalgic. So what the intellectual adventure there is a perspective on the past which has diverse mosaic-like characteristics. It's the genius of that book. And what it did, I believe, was present a methodology for thinking about place that depended on an integration, obviously, of a diversity of disciplines, whether we're talking about economics or social history or environmental history, or simply that broad ragbag of a disciplinary group, geography, which of course he is reinventing at the same time. But that was the point I wanted to make about the character of that book, that there is a particular kind of perspective which rides, if you like, quite delicately on the abyss. So the abyss is both a figure of speech, but it's also a reference to those latent tensions between land and sea, between dry thinking and wet thinking, between disciplinary specialization. One of the more interesting parts of that exposition of the history of Palladianism in the Veneto is the record that, as you'd expect from Denis, with his strong social conscience, of social unease, social unrest. Inevitably, the production or canalization of the rivers favoured the patrician class that were the landowners. The commons, the watery commons, find themselves enclosed, not by statute, but by the simple fact of greater powers of investment and greater powers, therefore, of profitability for a particular class. He captures that moment. We see very clearly that something happens at the expense of something else. Nevertheless, the Palladian moment becomes all the more valuable because there seems to be an equilibrium. The equilibrium is not in the landscape, it's not even in the extraordinary harmony of the buildings, it's in the eye of the viewer, it's in the eye of the perspective maker. So I think that looking at that book today, one is presented with a challenge. Let's just say that there is a natural fit. This is what Denis persuades us of. There is a natural fit between the value of an interdisciplinary approach to geography and the subject studied. Therefore, to take a counter-example, would this extraordinary marquetry, this capacity to create a mosaic which adds up to a larger picture, work equally well, for example, in, say, post-war Berlin? Would it work equally well in torn-down Liverpool? Would it work equally well in Marghera? And if so, how? In other words, the methodology itself is to some extent a projection of the genius of the writer, and because of his influence on a generation and a half of scholars, it's also become not exactly an orthodoxy, but a possibility for interdisciplinary collaboration. And what I think it invites us to do is to reflect very carefully on how we now negotiate those bridges between the different specializations, so that we produce not a utopianism, but what I will call a dialectical relationship that is conscious of the islands. We go back to the Polesine that form the Polynesia, not just of a physical region, but also of an educational and research region. I said there was an anecdote. I didn't know Denis very well, but I have the feeling he knew me very well. We came together over, naturally, shared interests, and I can remember a Christmas party. I was just hoping that none of you were there in London. And it was going through, let's say it was a dialectical time in my life. So I was moving between one kind of association and another. Anyway, so I arrived there with the person who was most important to me in the world. And I can always remember Denis's expression. It's this quite unexpected additional person arrived in the room. And it was an expression of absolute empathy. I said, okay, well, I don't know what's happening in your life at the moment, what you're doing here, what's all going on, but of total acceptance. But it was an acceptance that wasn't judgmental, it was of embrace. So whatever journey you're on, come and be part of us. And that was my introduction, really, to him. And after that, many things went downstream after that, flowed out into the great lagoon of life. But the friendship with Denis endured. And then something else happened. So we published one or two things, and then I recommended to a publisher that a manuscript I'd written should be sent to Denis for review, because I knew he would not only have brilliant insights, but I also knew that his integrity was absolute. Actually, I didn't realize how absolute his integrity was. So he wrote a review, a report of my book, which, and the book had the unfortunate, or perhaps fortunate, title of Dark Writing. So I scritti oscuri, but they were too occult. So what he did was to write and say, well, this is a very interesting book, but it's too dark. And so he wrote a critique of the book, of the manuscript, for which I remain very grateful, and that's why the book is dedicated to him, because of his honesty and because of the profound respect I had for his intellect and also for his friendship and his honesty. I knew I had to start again, and I did. And I think the consequence of that was that as I was writing the book, I was also, in a way, reading across the legacy of Denis's work, and I hope doing it some kind of justice. But I mention it also because when he was pressed on the problem that he thought my manuscript faced, he said that you couldn't, this expression in English, you couldn't see the wood for the trees. And I thought, yes, this is a very interesting point. In the Palladian landscape, the trees have always been moved to the side to create the space of enlightenment. Denis's is profoundly a light writing, a writing that creates an unbelievable vision of possible harmonization between human cultures and non-human cultures. And he caught in my work a troubled perspective, which is more, if you like, Bosco, like more savage, and correctly said that what we needed to do was to start pruning. We needed to learn a new kind of government, a government of my prose in this case. So to remember him today is to understand perspective in a different sense. I think Leibniz once said that we are born in perspective. So in other words, if we start to think about the classic Florentine perspective as an invention of the 15th century, no, human visualization of the world is already in perspective. So when we start to create an intellectual adventure, the vision that Denis created of the Palladian landscape, where he himself looked through the eyes of Sorte and Palladio and the patrician patron, if you like, who organized the financial resources for these interventions, he was looking from his own perspective, as we saw so clearly earlier on today. So there was a prospettiva which is written right through that work, and that is part of what he projects into the future. That's what makes the enlargement of our practices and the possibility of our communities so compelling, because he's shown, just like the marquetry in that door, it does actually work. You can do it. And particularly when we find ourselves as professionals and scholars and educationalists under siege from cultural forces that fail to understand the importance of the mosaic, he is an inspiration for the future. So thank you.
Bene, grazie per questa tua veramente creativa espressione che spero possa essere versata in un tuo scritto da inserire nel libro che stiamo progettando. Sei te? Speriamo di sì.
Okay, grazie.
Bene, adesso c'è David Atkinson, poi sì, relatore, scusate. Vi presento David, che è stato uno dei studenti, di PhD student di Denis. L'ho conosciuto tanti anni fa, quando si occupava proprio durante la sua tesi del rapporto formale, iconologico dell'edilizia fascista durante appunto gli anni 20 e 30, e quindi questa idea culturale di una politica che si fa paesaggio attraverso delle scelte iconografiche. Prego.
Grazie, mi scuso anche per una presentazione in inglese. Many thanks for the invitation to come here, especially to Francesco. It's a great honor to be here and to be part of this very interesting discussion. I think the commonality of perspectives and the commonality of some of the experiences we're talking about is really quite interesting and distinctive, in that we're talking about somebody we each encountered in different types of ways, and yet the themes that are emerging of him and his care for people and his interest interest in doing the right thing, of high quality learning and research and engagement with Earth, with place, with geography, is coming through very clearly. So I'm going to try and talk about my experience as someone who was a PhD student of Denis, and then we did a couple of research projects together, and through that period we became very good friends as well. So these themes of Paesaggi and memorie, luoghi, hopefully be worked through these particular 3 vignettes, which I will present. So, in particular, when asked to think about Denis and his work, I thought a lot about his interest in walking and talking, and as we've heard about, walking through a garden or through a landscape and picking up the things that he saw as he went along, and engaging with the space and the place as he progressed. Talking, walking, I think these were some of his favourite pastimes. He liked to be outdoors. He liked to be with other people. So being outdoors with other people was one of his favourite things, it seemed to me. And so what's interesting, I think, is a point that Paul made about the idea of what he was evolving, perhaps consciously, perhaps unconsciously, was a methodology of place, of engaging with places, and as he moved around the world, of dipping down and connecting and touching and going deep into a particular place. Often I found as his PhD student, he'd enjoy taking somebody on that journey and apprenticing them in that particular perspective. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. But also, the interesting thing for me about this experience was the way that other voices were involved in these discussions, this methodology of place as well, about various texts from the past, and they may have been written texts or musical texts. We've heard about those from Stefano earlier on. And different voices in this conversation and different academic traditions that he was aware of, and he brought to bear in the moment and in that sense of actually thinking about place or space with somebody as he was sharing and teaching, and in my instance it seemed to be apprenticing and training me as he would have thought probably a humanist scholar. It seemed to me like he was actually trying to make me into a proper geographer as far as he understood that as well, but I'll talk about that a little bit later on. So I began a PhD with Denis in 1990. I was fresh out of an undergraduate degree in a different British university, which was very quantitative and very numerical and very... it didn't fit with me and my interests whatsoever. I was also quite raw and poorly versed in the requirements of doing research. There's no master's degree in those days, undergraduate degree and then straight into a PhD, so the first year would be quite a challenge. And Denis took me on, and he saw this as being his challenge, I think, to make me into a better researcher and a better geographer. And one of the things which is distinctive about that period 28 years ago is that there were not very many PhD students in Britain at that particular time. These days there's lots more because they're measured by the government, and it's part of the idea of what a university should do, be producing researchers for the future. But back in 1990, in times of economic austerity, as we're experiencing now as well, then there were not many PhD studentships around. He'd been a lecturer for around about short of 20 years, and I was his third PhD student in that time. And these days, somebody of his standing would probably be expected to take on 2 or 3 PhD students a year. So this was not very often that a PhD student came along. So therefore, he invested time into me. I'm immensely grateful for this as the years have gone by. It was my great good fortune that he decided that I needed to be educated. He had 3 categories. I was thinking about this. 3 categories that he thought I had to absorb, and this may have been my particular experience as a postgraduate being trained up by him. The first of which he decided, and he repeated this regularly, that I had to be a geographer. And that meant particular ways of seeing, interpreting, being in the world, and we've been hearing about that this morning. And the particular traditions that geographers had developed in certain respects to understand the world, I had to be aware of those and to engage with them insofar as they were relevant to the topic that I was dealing with. Second, I had to understand that within the geographical range of topics and themes and methodologies, that I had to be, or it was, no, he actually more or less told me I had to be engaged with the humanities approach. This suited me. The statistical, quantitative training I'd had didn't sit easily with me. But I remember very distinctly the first time he said, this is a way to be a geographer that you haven't encountered before, you won't have seen before, but there is a long-standing, it's a marginal, but a long-standing tradition in Anglophone geography of the humanities approach, and it's important and significant that we keep this approach on the table, we keep it moving forwards. So this was very useful for me. And then the final thing, interestingly, is that he saw cultural geography, a label that was relatively marginal back in the early 1990s, that himself and Steve Daniels and 2 or 3 other people doing this, and then a gaggle of not very many PhD students, about 4 or 5 PhD students, who were doing cultural geography. So the idea of actually establishing a field, a way of thinking about culture, by which I think he meant as well the humanities approach to geography and the ways of being a geographer, alive to different cultures, which might not be measured or quantified in a way that British geography was still quite hardwired into doing. That this was also important for him as well, the idea that a cultural geography PhD student might get a job in a different university. In a different university, we might spread out the presence of this small movement, which was seen quite like a sect and a great deal of suspicion from established geography in those days. So those are the 3 things he wanted me to be: a geographer with a humanities approach and to self-identify as a cultural geographer. And then this training continued after my PhD. He didn't leave me alone. It was a great pleasure to spend time with him. But he carried on training me, carried on apprenticing me as we went forwards. So as such, we travelled and we walked and we talked and we learned together. There was much more learning on my part and much less, I think, on his part from me. But nevertheless, this is what I'm going to discuss now through 3 different examples, and how this methodology of place, which I'm now shamelessly borrowing, how this methodology of place was evolved in certain, just 3 quick examples about humanities and geography and cultural geography as it was positioned at that particular time. So the first example is Lago de Nemi in the Castelli Romani in Lazio, in the hills outside of Rome, volcanic area. And this was when I was working with Denis on a project called Imperial Cities, comparing Rome and London in 1995, 1997. I spent quite a bit of time in Rome doing my PhD, so I knew the city very well. And Denis, surprisingly, hadn't really been to Rome much. He'd had a couple of days there in his career. He was alive to this. He was aware of this. He knew this was perhaps an oversight on his part, partly because of his engagement with the Catholic Church and his sense of continuing kind of engagement and pushing away from these structures, but he nevertheless realised were hardwired into him and his ways of understanding and thinking. And then also because of his work on Renaissance Italy and the importance of Rome to that particular context. So we organised we had a meeting in Rome, and then we decided to stay on for a couple of days. And we thought about places we wanted to go to. So I wanted to go to the Agropontino, as Stefano was talking about earlier, the Bonifica projects in the Agropontino to the south of Rome. So we hired a car, we went there, we went to the northern end to Aprilia, and it wasn't a very good example. Sabaudia to the south is much more significant. It is unspoiled, it's unchanged. Denis was talking about Lago de Nemi, wanted desperately to go to Lago de Nemi, so that was the afternoon, to Lago de Nemi. And Denis used this text by James George Fraser, The Golden Bough, A Study in Magic and Religion, you see there, 1890, as being a key part of how he started to introduce people to cultural geography at his master's course in Royal Holloway in London, because he'd moved to Royal Holloway around about 93, 94. And this was something he used to get students thinking about this different way of engaging with the world, geographically, but also culturally, through the humanities as well. So he wanted to go to the Lago de Nemi because the Golden Bough starts with a discussion of the goddess Diana and the temple and the edges of this lake, and then the story of people being the protector of the temple until they were killed by someone else who then became the protector, so on and so forth. And so he was desperate to go there. When he went there, he was enraptured. It is a very striking landscape, as some of you will know. But he was enraptured by this because he was a geographer. And first of all, he started talking about volcanology. He looked at the landscape, and I wasn't expecting this, but he started looking at and talking about volcanoes and craters and calderas and so on and so forth. And it strikes me, we were talking about the Palladian landscape earlier on. The first few pages of that, when I read it, I was really struck by his engagement with the physical geography, the morphology of the landscapes, which he was described as this being part of the way that a geographer engages and understands the world. And then he talked about James Fraser and his use of the myth of Diana. Then he talked about how various British artists, including William Mallard Turner, you see here, this is 1819, I think, who had painted the lake and reworked Grand Tour artistic traditions. And in this sense, this was all about how place was constituted by engagement with physical geography, with place, with artistic texts, with traditions, with myth, with ideas, all coalescing and finding a balance, which may have been shifting as time went by, but a balance in this particular place for particular people going there and being alive to this and talking about this was a key part of what I was supposed to absorb through this lesson, and which he was doing himself, this methodology of walking and talking through these particular places. On this occasion, I had something to add as well, because I knew about these Roman ships built by, or built for, the Emperor Caligula in the 1st century AD, which had been sailed on the Lago de Nemi for the emperor, and then were visible on clear days through the water. And so these were excavated in an ambitious project between 1927 and 1932, which actually meant reducing the level of the lake by around about 20 meters or so. So these ships became clear in the muds, which were then brought out. So you can see them here being exposed as the waters retreated, and these Roman ships were brought out to the surface. So I knew about this story, but I didn't realize quite how the context of the lake and the muds and the caldera were quite so explicitly and emphatically part of this particular episode. So I started talking about this and how it was part of the fascist regime's engagement with Romanità and the sense of this ancient history being brought back to life. So what we then found, I saw on the banks of the lake, a building in unmistakably fascist style from the 1930s, and I said that must be part of this story. So we went into the building, and it was the hall in which these ships were preserved. They were lost in action in the Second World War and were burnt, but nevertheless the building is still there. This is one of the ancient anchors you can see on the left-hand side, but the building is still there with replicas of the parts of the ships now. But nevertheless, this is what we went to see, and this became another part of the story. Denis was particularly pleased with this day's work, with the idea possibly that I was actually starting to learn and finally taking notice of his education and his methodology of place. The second example was a bit more personal for Denis, which is in Liverpool in the UK. I moved to the University of Hull, where I'm still based, a couple of years later, and Denis came to visit me, in part because his mother lived in Grimsby, just over the estuary in the north of England from where I was, and he came to stay with me, and he also wanted to drive across the north of England on a motorway, which went from Hull to Liverpool. The M62 is called, and it connects the region. And he'd been asked to write about an arts project which was connecting the region in that sense along the M62. So we drove to Liverpool and back in the day just to engage, just to talk to each other, to sort of reconnect, but also to kind of engage with this idea of the region being connected. And this was, I think, his last visit to Liverpool before he died. It was last because he was moving or just about to move, I think, or perhaps he had just moved to California. So, as part of this story, he wanted to go and see his childhood home, which I don't know where it is, but it was like this street, which I found, it became clear where this is a little bit later on. It was one of these red brick terraces from the upper working class background from which he came from. So I thought the street looked fine, it was okay. Denis was really upset because he remembered a working class tradition of people preparing of scrubbing their doorsteps, of making the house look spotless. And he said his mother would have been really, really upset by the state of the street, which again I thought was okay. But he was really dismayed and quite shaken by this thing. But he also had a little story for me as well, because he took me around the corner to this particular spot. Well, we walked for, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes or something, to this particular spot here. And he pointed out the bank and the barber shop and the bus shelter in the middle of the roundabout, you see there. And then said, this is Penny Lane. Beatles talked about, or sang about, or was introduced to the world in lots of different ways. And he told, then unrolled another geography of this particular place as well, where lots of Liverpool school kids would come to this particular site and get on their bus to go to school across the city, or change buses if they were moving around the city to different places, including Lennon and McCartney and Harrison in that particular period. And he said this was interesting because for kids in Liverpool, Penny Lane had all kinds of associations which were about being away from the surveillance of teachers or parents. So it was a place for the first cigarettes, or the first kiss, or the friends that you weren't supposed to have. It was a place of freedom and slight childhood level freedom and revelry in various respects as well. So we sat there looking at this, walking around it beneath those blue suburban skies. And his text here, with the musical text and the English traditions of housekeeping and growing up, all combined again in this engagement with a particular place. So the final example I'll talk about, or sorry, again, this is part of Penny Lane from a different perspective. The final place I'll talk about, which we went to and we discussed and we dove deep in one particular place into somewhere in its history, in its past, and its sense of place, was Oradour-sur-Glane in France, in western France. And this was near Denis's holiday home, which he'd bought with a string of people who were at university with him in the late 1960s, early 1970s. So it was a large old house in a small village in France, which they picked up for very peanuts, for small amounts of money, I think. In days before risk assessments and university regulations, they used to take students from Oxford Brookes University there on a field trip, and they'd all just sleep on the floor and just cook each other dinner in this big sprawling house. And then what he used to do, and this is a British tradition in geography of field trips, of going away for a week together and spending lots of time learning about a region and learning about particular places and doing exercises in measuring exercises in the field, and the idea of the field as a particular site of learning, which is actually still inscribed into government expectations of a geography student in the UK should have a certain amount of time in the field, and this is the benchmark for a geography degree. And so they went to Oradour-sur-Glane, students from Oxford Brookes University, and studied the historical geography of medieval village form, of a church at one end of the village and the fields surrounding it, and then the main road going through the centre and the shops in it, and then the spaces behind, and so on and so forth. Although this was in part because they didn't have a language to discuss the various really sobering and terrible events which took place at Oradour in 1944, in June 1944, where a brigade, a troop of German SS troops suspecting resistance activity in the region, and one of their colleagues was held by resistance fighters somewhere in the Orador. Came and enclosed the village, herded everybody into buildings and burnt the buildings down and killed 642 of the villagers. This was awful. This was terrible. This is dreadful. The village was left on the order of Charles de Gaulle as a memorial site to the awful events that happened there. You can see here this sense of be respectful of the moral geographies of behaviour at a site such as this, where the stones are testimony to events that Europe was trying to come in the post-war period, trying to come to terms with how to commemorate these events, how to work through these kind of stories of disaster and destruction. This was a response in France in this particular period. And it's still indeed President Macron of France visitors in November last year, apparently, so he's still mobilised politically in various respects. So Denis talked about this particular place and how they'd used it for, he was slightly embarrassed about this, he said we used it for traditional historical geography. We didn't have the language of commemoration, of geographical trauma, of memory in human geography in those days. The literature, the theories weren't up to speed with the requirements of society to commemorate places and events such as this in the 1970s. Now, I remember saying very clearly we would do it very differently now. Remember this space in lots of different ways. So that's the final example of how texts and places and reflections and traditions shaped his ways of thinking about engaging with the world, and his keen sense of learning and his perpetual enduring interest in places and their meanings. So I've got 3 very quick points to sum up. First, for Denis, this idea of being in the field, of walking and engaging, and being in spaces, being in regions, being in places, actually in little spots on the surface of the earth, he did this as a hobby. He was interested in this, but he also took people on board with him as well. And he did it with quite a few people here. It's emerging in these interesting discussions today. And he drew upon a huge range of different text and cultural associations to explore the idea of places and their evolution and development and their meaning, which were on the table. Another thing which strikes me, which is this is a perspective from the UK and from England, is that Denis was very European in his range of interests and very Catholic in his range of concerns. I've talked about Italy and France, both of which places he was equally at home in. He worked in the UK as well, and then he went and worked in the States. He knew all these different places and engaged with them in lots of different ways. And in a range and a linguistic engagement that very few people in British geography would be able to match these days. In fact, arguably, if anybody would really be able to match this. So that sense of engagement and skills is something which we've lost as a discipline within Britain, which I think is a great shame, and we've impoverished ourselves in many respects. And finally, the one thing which I'm more personally grateful for is the sense of these perspectives and these ways of thinking, these ways of engaging with geography, with place, with understanding the world around us and ways to think about it and then to pass it on to other people. He tutored me, he apprenticed me, and he engaged me with this in this very holistic fashion, and I'm very grateful to him for that grounding which he gave me in this business of geography. Thank you.
Grazie David per ricordarci anche Oradour-sur-Glane, quindi il fatto che lui dalla casetta di Ansac-sur-Glane portava sempre gli amici a vedere questo luogo veramente importante, il lago di Nemi, quindi proprio un grande viaggiatore, un viaggiatore culturale che ci ha lasciato questi ricordi. Quindi vedete la coerenza tematica è stata rispettata benissimo dei relatori, che sono molto grato. E ora concludiamo con la presentazione di un libro da parte di Maria Pia Cunico, che ha curato insieme a Margherita Azzi Visentini e a Rallo, una specie di continuità proprio formale, territoriale e anche estesa al giardino, quindi una cosa che magari il paesaggio palladiano, giardini, non abbiamo dei progetti di giardini, però quantomeno questo è un aspetto di eredità che vale la pena raccontarci. Siamo un po' oltre i tempi previsti, però penso che riusciamo a starci dentro e a te Maria Pia.
Bene, buongiorno a tutti. Per me è veramente un piacere partecipare oggi e soprattutto anche conoscere delle persone che hanno conosciuto Denis Cosgrove, ma che soprattutto hanno di lui questo ricordo così intenso, così umano, così grande, e veramente un bellissimo gruppo di studiosi che porta avanti i suoi pensieri e i suoi ricordi. Io parlerò di questo libro che ho scritto con Margherita Visentini, che ringrazio di essere qui a darmi forza, e Giuseppe Rallo. Questo libro si chiama Paesaggi di Villa. Vediamo se riesco. Paesaggi di Villa ha avuto un libro che è uscito 2 anni fa, ha avuto un finanziamento da parte dell'Istituto regionale Ville Venete, è stato pubblicato da Marsiglio, ed è un libro che ha avuto molti maestri, per fortuna, molti maestri, nel senso che ovviamente per tutti noi Lionello Puppi, nomi come Lionello Puppi, come Francesco Vallerani, insomma, avevamo le spalle coperte da anni di studi sulla villa veneta. Ci sembrava però interessante affrontare il tema del paesaggio della villa, cioè di quello che si apre, si dilata, si impalca, si disegna al di là della villa comunemente intesa. E in questo sicuramente il libro di Cosgrove, Paesaggio palladiano, c'è stato di continuo riferimento, soprattutto come metodo di lettura. Questa lettura attenta che andava dallo studio di tutte le fonti iconografiche e storiche, ma anche ai sopralluoghi continui, attenti, per capire veramente quali erano gli elementi significativi di questo paesaggio. E voglio citare alcune frasi tratte dal libro Paesaggio palladiano. Questo ad esempio è interessantissimo, cioè il paesaggio della villa che indica il senso della creatività umana nel dar forma ad una geografia, che effettivamente in molti casi c'è una geografia preesistente, con diverse sfaccettature, con diverse declinazioni. Sappiamo bene come il territorio veneto abbia delle caratteristiche ambientali molto diverse, pianure, abbiamo le bonifiche, abbiamo la montagna, abbiamo le colline, eppure lì dove la villa veneta va a costruirsi si adatta ad un territorio, ma nello stesso tempo costruisce un paesaggio. Quindi questo doppio aspetto è veramente interessante da rileggere, e con gli amici Margherita Visentini e Giuseppe Rallo abbiamo veramente capito la necessità di andare al di là delle mura del giardino comunemente inteso e di guardare a quella spazialità scenica di cui parla Cosgrove, che veramente di cui tutto il territorio veneto è intessuto. Abbiamo quasi più di 4.000 ville venete presenti, quindi veramente si può parlare di un straordinario paesaggio ancora presente, e come spesso ampie porzioni di territorio ne siano state influenzate dalla costruzione della villa e dei suoi spazi. Altro tema importante, il tema del paesaggio rurale, perché anche la campagna entra dentro l'impalcato della costruzione della villa e ne fa parte. La campagna non è un fatto a sé, non è un territorio che sfugge alle regole compositive della villa, ma entra dentro, e sembra quasi fare da controcanto alla presenza dell'architettura. Quindi lo spazio ha una spazialità scenica formidabile. E questo spazio non è solo il giardino, ma è anche il bosco, ma è anche la vigna, ma è anche il territorio agrario, no? E questo è straordinario capire la sapienza costruttiva che era la base di questi progetti, no? Quasi ci fosse un regista unico che ha costruito la spazialità scenica del paesaggio veneto della villa. Perché la villa, sappiamo bene, non è solo l'architettura, ma la villa è anche tutto l'insieme delle architetture che sono costruite intorno all'edificio padronale, ma la villa è anche lo spazio vuoto, ed è il giardino, ed è l'orto, ed è la corte, ma è anche la campagna, il brolo, le serre, no? E quindi è veramente una trama costruttiva straordinaria, con delle regole e delle misure molto precise, che però si adattano a quella geografia di cui parlavo prima. E quindi questa è la bellezza, perché ogni villa ha una sua connotazione particolare, a seconda del territorio in cui viene inserita. Bisogna cominciare dai muri delle campagne per comprendere bene il disegno della villa. Il grande muro che delimita la proprietà, non il muro del giardino, non il muro della corte, ma il muro dello spazio coltivato appartenente alla famiglia, che spesso sfugge oggi dai progetti di tutela e di conservazione, perché spesso non fa parte del vincolo di tutela, ma spesso è parte integrante della villa e connota anche, prende dentro anche elementi preesistenti alla villa stessa, come qui in Vallillasi, dove Villa Pompei determina il disegno del giardino prendendo dentro anche il tema del parco e del vecchio castello medievale che sorge poco distante, no? Quindi paesaggio estremamente complesso, paesaggisti estremamente intelligenti che sanno comporre insieme geografie, elementi storici, strade. Ecco, anche il tema della strada è un tema interessante, perché la villa si colloca spesso su preesistenti stradali e con le strade innesca dei meccanismi di relazione. Paesaggio come teatro, ecco, ne parla spesso Cosgrove, la teatralità scenica del paesaggio palladiano, che va oltre le mura del giardino, perché spesso le ville sembrano quasi parlarsi, no? Sembra quasi che sia stato un grande regista che abbia stabilito di collocare gli elementi delle ville di modo che si potessero parlare, potessero far parte di un unico gesto scenico. E gli esempi sono tantissimi. Qui siamo a Montegalda e sono 3-4 le ville, ma poi entrano dentro anche i borghi, entrano le chiese, entrano i castelletti, insomma l'impalcato si arricchisce anche di preesistenze originarie, però l'insieme determina uno spazio scenico di grandissima unicità. Un capitolo importante del libro di Cosgrove è dedicato all'acqua. L'acqua nel territorio veneto è la trama costruttiva principale. Acqua non soltanto come via principale di accesso alle ville, fiumi, canali, ma acqua anche come elemento di bonifica, e quindi tutti i ritratti che sono stati realizzati dai veneziani per bonificare il territorio. Lì viene costruita la villa e quindi c'è una fortissima relazione tra la collocazione della villa e il rapporto con la via d'acqua. In certi casi, guardate, qui siamo in un caso molto interessante, perché Villa Morosini Cappello a Cartigliano, no? La villa si colloca tra una vecchia strada carrabile, un'antica strada romana a monte, e il fiume Brenta a valle, e il disegno complessivo del muro, che comprende giardino, peschiere, cortili, ville, va anche a prendere un brano dell'area fluviale, del territorio fluviale. Quindi si costruisce un impalcato molto complicato che adatta e determina il senso vero della villa e soprattutto ne determina l'assetto principale. Per non parlare poi del tema del fiume come via d'acqua principale e il tema degli accessi. Oggi in parte questi accessi sono perduti. Nel caso della rotonda di Palladio non si capisce più che la rotonda è stata costruita in quel punto perché vi era una via d'acqua principale, il Bacchiglione era un corso d'acqua importante, vi era un vecchio porto alla base della villa e vi era, con ogni probabilità, un accesso principale dalla villa, ora tagliato dalla strada statale che ne ha impedito, che ne impedisce di capirne la relazione. Però abbiamo anche ancora leggibili i casi della Riviera del Brenta, dove ancora queste relazioni sono ancora lampanti, parlanti, fondanti, e si vede come il fronte della villa costruisca il suo accesso principale come il palazzo veneziano sul Canal Grande, sulla via d'acqua principale. Noi abbiamo quindi casi interessantissimi come il caso di Villa Pisani a Stra, che appunto si attesta con questo orientamento particolare del fronte principale della villa, perché da lì vi era il punto di accesso principale al complesso. Bene, un altro, sarò velocissima, ma un altro degli interessantissimi temi toccati nel libro di Cosgrove è quello dei canali delle bonifiche. In particolare nel libro abbiamo studiato il tema del Bacchiglione, fiume che nasce a Vicenza e che sfocia poi in laguna, e dei suoi canali principali. Il Bacchiglione a Longare si divide in un primo canale, canale Bisatto, e poi a Padova si divide in un altro canale, il canale della Battaglia. Si costruisce quindi come un grande, l'abbiamo chiamato anello fluviale, e su questo anello, che era una via commerciale importantissima per i veneziani per raggiungere l'entroterra, su queste vie d'acqua si sono collocate nel tempo moltissime ville. Il canale per sua struttura ha una natura rettilinea, no? Ma la villa poi si attesta a seconda del suo rapporto con la geografia con cui dialoga. Il castello del Cataio si colloca in un momento retrostante rispetto alla via d'acqua. Si tratta di una zona paludosa, quindi era necessario costruire la villa un pochino ritratti rispetto all'acqua. Però la scamoziana Villa Molina Lamandia invece costruisce il suo fronte proprio sull'argine d'ingresso dal canale, e il giardino in questo caso si allunga sui lati, quindi abbiamo un impianto tipologico molto diverso ma estremamente stimolante e interessante. Oppure il caso di Villa Emo a Rivella, che si costruisce la villa scamoziana un po' all'interno del canale, ma un tempo vi era un accesso diretto dal canale alla via, oggi completamente cancellato, ma si vede come la villa si sia adattata alla matrice ortogonale preesistenze, probabilmente già di epoca romana, e abbia poi costruito i suoi spazi, architetture, giardini, cortili, vigne, frutteti, viali, secondo una rigorosa geometria che apparteneva appunto a un'antichissima storia ancora pre-veneziana. Oppure, sempre sul canale Battaglia, Villa Selvatico a Battaglia Terme, collocata sulla sommità di una collina, perché intorno il terreno si stava allora bonificando. Questa villa aveva un accesso privilegiato dal canale, accesso che purtroppo per molti motivi oggi non è più recuperabile, ma che ci racconta ancora una volta di come fosse continuo e diretto il rapporto con l'acqua. Si arrivava via barca, si accedeva tramite un viale alberato, si arrivava a un primo giardino, si saliva poi con lo scalone alla villa principale. Era un disegno perfettamente controllato, regolato, no? Di grandissima sapienza architettonica. Altro caso interessante nel caso del canale Battaglia, Villa Dolfin dal Martello. Questa villa oggi apre il suo fronte verso la strada carrabile, ma a ben guardare, e in questo è stato fondamentale il sopralluogo delle foto aeree fatte da Stefano Maruzzo, che ringrazio ancora oggi, grande fotografo aereo che col suo piccolo aereo a motore ha sorvolato tutte le ville e ne ha reso delle immagini fotografiche straordinarie, vediamo come il fronte principale della villa fosse sul retro. Si apre un fronte importante con un timpano significativo e il motivo di questo retro ci è stato spiegato da una planimetria storica. Abbiamo trovato una vecchia planimetria della villa dove non vi è la odierna strada di accesso, ma vi era un accesso dal canale, un doppio viale fiancheggiato da statue e da alberi, e si arrivava alla villa da quello che oggi è il retro. Quindi è importantissimo questo metodo di lavoro che abbiamo appreso anche studiando Cosgrove, del mettere insieme sopralluoghi continui, studi, ma anche studi delle fonti storiche per capire veramente la storia di un luogo. E alla fine volevo chiudere con questi due casi, conoscerete tutti, Villa Contarini Camerini a Piazzola sul Brenta, una villa che ha avuto un primo intervento di Andrea Palladio, poi ha avuto successivi interventi barocchi che ne hanno ampliato la villa ed poi è stata completata da questo meraviglioso anfiteatro che si apre sulla piazza. Oggi si giunge alla villa dal fronte principale, no? E questa villa molto grande ha determinato la forma di tutto l'impianto urbano, ma a ben guardare ha determinato anche la geometria del territorio coltivato che si trova sul suo retro. E a ben guardare su questo retro si allunga un viale molto interessante che oggi è circondato da campi coltivati e non viene compreso nelle visite che si aggirano nella villa. A ben guardare questo viale si conclude però in un grande cancello con lo stemma dei Camerini e dei Contarini, quindi delle due famiglie che hanno posseduto questa villa, ma oggi non se ne capisce la ragione. La ragione viene spiegata andando a vedere una vecchia planimetria cinquecentesca, dove si vede che qui vi è il cancello e qui esisteva un ponte di barche sul fiume Brenta ed era l'unico ponte che permetteva di raggiungere il territorio al di là del Brenta. Dovete sapere che il Brenta è un fiume molto famoso per le sue brentane, è un fiume molto non vi erano mai stati costruiti ponti fissi, vi erano solo ponti di barche che si spostavano a seconda della corrente, e la presenza di questo ponte ha giustificato l'assetto di quel lungo viale che si allunga sul retro della villa. Vorrei concludere con altri due casi, velocissimamente questo perché è stato un caso fortuito ma molto fortunato. Siamo lungo il canale Bisato, il canale che viene da Vicenza, va a Monselice. Durante uno dei sopralluoghi abbiamo scoperto all'interno di una rotatoria la presenza di una doppia pilastri in muratura coronati da anche, ma guardate oggi appunto lo stato dell'arte che certo non premia la bellezza di questi elementi. Questi elementi appartengono a una storia antichissima, sono l'antica via che un tempo si scendeva dal canale, si arrivava all'argine, si scendeva ed in carrozza si percorreva un lungo viale, quindi i pilastri erano l'accesso alla villa, e la villa si trova all'interno della collina, Villa Contarini a Val Nogaredo, ancora esistente, ma che ha perso completamente, con la costruzione poi del paese intorno, la relazione antica che la legava all'accesso dal canale. Quindi è veramente un lavoro, io lo dico quasi di tipo archeologico alle volte, no? Da andare a cercare gli indizi per avere conferma di un assetto, di una storia, di una forma. Volevo finire con questa meraviglia, Villa Godi Malinverni a Lonedo, che è stata molto studiata da Cosgrove nel suo libro, e che ci è stata preziosissima perché nel libro di Cosgrove viene pubblicato questo, sapete che Villa Malinverni sorge a fianco di Villa Piovene, non sorge a caso in quel luogo, ma sorge vicino ad un fiume, in questo caso non utilizzato come corso d'acqua ma utilizzato come energia per le segherie che le famiglie controllavano lungo il fiume, e nel libro di Cosgrove viene pubblicata 1578, quindi pochi anni successivo al progetto di Palladio, viene pubblicata questa planimetria. Questa planimetria è stata veramente fondante per il nostro lavoro, perché a ben guardare la parte centrale della planimetria vi è il palazzo, ed è questa bellissima doppia, questo doppio semicerchio che viene riportato nel disegno di Palladio, che da un lato dava su una cisterna con una doppia scalinata ad un pozzo che dava sul vigneto sottostante, e dall'altro si apriva come un grande anfiteatro, che è ancora esistente, che guarda verso la vallata. Quello che ci aveva incuriosito era la presenza di questo elemento, che oggi non c'è più, che però giustificava anche l'assetto, l'orientamento della villa, il fatto che la villa fosse stata realizzata non orientata sulla barchessa preesistente, sulla torre medievale preesistente, ma che avesse avuto questo orientamento. Questo orientamento significava che qui vi era una via che giungeva dal fiume. Siamo stati in sopralluogo, perché oggi vedete questa via non c'è più, anzi è stata costruita questa brutta strada asfaltata che va addirittura a sbattere con questa curva sul bastione cinquecentesco, quindi questi oltraggi al paesaggio fatti dalle infrastrutture stradali continuano in maniera devastante nel Veneto. Ma che succede? Che se andiamo a vedere il bastione troviamo la presenza della vecchia apertura, e quindi probabilmente vi era una via che andava al di sotto del bastione e poi arrivava al fiume, ed era la via più breve per raggiungere la villa arrivando dal fiume. Quindi questo lavoro di archeologi ci è stato veramente utilissimo per avere conferme alle nostre supposizioni. Vorrei chiudere con quell'ultima frase, che è la frase con cui Cosgrove chiude il suo libro: il grande dono del paesaggio palladiano, la ragione della sua influenza sulla nostra immaginazione è bellissimo, no? È un paesaggio di sognanti visioni, ed è veramente davvero così. Grazie.
Bene, ringrazio tutti. Il tempo per fare i commenti non ci sono, qualcosa è stato detto durante il coffee break, quindi ci congediamo perché dobbiamo lasciare anche la sala. Veramente non ho parole per ringraziarvi per aver contribuito a questa rappresentazione di un lavoro di un amico. Questo io l'ho chiamato in altra sede, parlando di Gabriele Zanetto, l'impegno della memoria. L'impegno della memoria e dell'autobiografia è così denso, così ricco di sfumature, di non detto, che non ci consente il normale approccio della scrittura scientifica accademica. Io vorrei che questo tipo di percorso venisse adottato, allargato, con gli scambi che potremmo farci anche tra noi. Adesso magari ne parleremo con la pubblicazione del volume dedicato proprio a Denis. Spero che potrà essere diffuso, divulgato, dunque mantenere questa memoria. Grazie ancora e buona giornata a tutti.